Well, good morning. I'm Ken Biberai, and welcome to Coffee with Ken, a thought leadership series at the nexus of business and politics. Last week, we welcomed historian John Meacham for a conversation about the soul of America. And today, we dive into the entrepreneurial spirit about bootstrapping companies. It's an exciting time. We're joined by Heidi, the COO of New Theory Ventures, Zoya Lehrer, founder of Orgo, Soraya Bagheri, head of legal for PunchBowl News. Ladies, so good to see you. How's everyone doing?
Morning.
Morning.
Everyone's got the coffee, right?
Coffee with Ken, my dream come true.
Water.
It's years in the making. Well, look, let's just do a quick round robin, get to know each other, make sure everyone knows what you guys have been up to. Soraya, I'm going to start with you, and I want to hear a little bit about what's happening at PunchBowl News and a bit of the origin story at Electo. And for folks watching, in full disclosure, Soraya and her husband Naeem and I have known each other for years. I was an advisor on their company, an investor, so it's fully been disclosed that, I'm biased towards her and what she's created in the past. So tell us about the little bit of a founder journey and how you ended up where you are today.
I would love to share. And thanks again, Ken, for all your support throughout the years as well. So Naeem and I was actually my husband. We're also co-founders, founded Electo.
And you're still married.
We're still married, yes. And we're still working together despite all, they're a little bit, we were acquired and we're still working together. A little bit less than before, but we founded essentially a data company. So it was, we were tracking legislation, providing directories and other types of data to government affairs professionals, and created this technology where we were able to simplify the work of those within this space. It was really exciting that about kind of this time last year, we started having conversations with PunchBowl News, which is one of the fastest growing media organizations. They breathe, live everything that is on the Hill and Congress. If you haven't subscribed to PunchBowl News, you definitely should. But the founders are really doing such a great job, and we're always very impressed with Anna, Jake, and what they've built. And so we really wanted to find a way to kind of link our data with news and what was happening every day in Washington for our subscribers, because we had a common following. So there were those that were kind of subscribed to PunchBowl News, but they were using our data. And so it felt like the perfect partnership. We started having conversations. We really didn't know where the partnership would lead. It did lead to an acquisition, and Naeem and I and some of our team actually ended up joining PunchBowl News. And so we're there now. I'm the VP of product integration, but also head of legal. So I have a legal background, and I was practicing law before founding Electo. And yeah, here we are. We're working on really exciting stuff at PunchBowl News. Really excited for what's on the horizon. And yeah, it's great that I still get to work with Naeem, although he's more on the business side now, business development side.
Amazing. Well, look, similarly, Heidi, I feel like you and I had this totally different kind of connection in life together as friends, kind of more from like the political sphere. And now you're kind of neck deep in VC world and supporting companies at New Theory. I just still drink coffee, but you're doing all this exciting stuff. So we'd love to hear what you're up to, what kind of companies you guys are looking for, how it's going. Fill us in.
Yeah, so fun fact, Ken and I met, over a decade ago at a friend's wedding that Ken was officiating. And in all of my pictures of the couple up at the altar, there's this white-haired man in front of me, sort of blocking Ken.
It's very rude. He was just blocking.
So rude.
Yeah.
Former President Clinton, because that's sort of the connection between Ken, our mutual friends, and our political ties. But I made a left turn, a right turn, perhaps, depending on how you think about it, into venture capital and the world of finance about 4 years ago, after spending my career in entertainment and media, and then advocacy and government affairs. And largely because I care about gender equality and gender equity. And what I had noticed both in sort of my first chapter in entertainment in Los Angeles, my second career chapter in Washington, D.C. in advocacy and government affairs, really is that, it's critical that we have more women in Congress, for sure. It's critical that we have more women in the C-suite and on corporate boards and in every corner of the world where decisions are being made. And currently, we still don't have gender equity in that regard. But what really became present for me is that until women have the same economic power as men in this country, we'll always be at the mercy of their decision making. And that led me into finance. I now run a family office, not my family office, that was started by an incredible female serial and social entrepreneur who sort of shares a passion that I do for gender equity. And as a result, we're we have sort of varied investments and significant assets under management, but for the venture and early stage investment side of our portfolio, we over-index in women and diverse founders. Over 90% of our portfolio are comprised of that constituency.
That's amazing. And Zoya, we met, I guess it was like 2 years ago, and it was at a cool fintech event Barclays was sponsoring. It was one of our first in-person events in New York City, which was really neat. And I kind of kept associating you as finance and fintech. And then, we reconnected over the summer, and it's like you took the plunge. So fill everyone in. What's Orgo, like your story, why you made the pivot, and where things are now, because I feel like it's pretty lifetime for you.
Happy to. And in fact, these worlds are colliding. I'm not in your political world or sphere whatsoever. In fact, I'm the least political person you'll meet, which is kind of the irony of me being here and perhaps the unifying factor of the topic that's at hand today. But yes, in fact, my career stemmed for about 20 years within financial services, banking, SaaS, insurance, and always within a technical capacity. My degree is in computer science / information technology and informatics, which is a thing. And so I've been in the IT field for a while, and it just kind of, evolved from the CIO path and over to digital and just focusing on all things digital experiences within a number of portfolios, been part of M&A and all aspects of M&A. And so given our geography within the New York, New Jersey area, that's obviously unavoidable. Last we met, in fact, was in that fintech / banking capacity. And it was great to have attended, yes, in fact, one of those very early in-person events where chairs were pretty far apart. The stage was very, very far apart. And then yet again, we were kind of still pushing through the need to reconnect in person, which is great. So since that point, and exactly about a year ago, I did in fact take the plunge. I felt that my skill set stemming from that tech field, if you will, has become and always will be transferable, but in a way that became very personally meaningful. So I've been straddling both the personal life as well as the professional for all the years, and being many times the only woman in the boardroom in the earlier parts of my career within banking insurance, as I mentioned. So it's kind of been a brand, if you will, and I've been very comfortable within that space. Just kind of growing within the ranks and normalizing that a little bit more, Heidi, in the way that you've described. That's a passion of mine that's shared as well. And on the personal side, again, as an extension of that plight, if you will, I now have my own 3 daughters. And so we're putting them into the world and arming them hopefully with all of the skills that they'll themselves deploy. So straddling these 2 worlds, I've got the professional, I've got the personal, raising 3 daughters, 13, 9, and 6 are their ages, very, very busy. They're 3 athletes, which puts them into a different category, puts me as a parent and our family in a completely different kind of like speed of life. And so it is that speed that I felt the tools were not keeping up with. And so as a technologist making that observation, there's a chasm that exists between B2B and B2C. I grew frustrated by that observation and ultimately led to action. So we're affecting logistics of daily life in a way that we've yet to fully even begin to feel the impact of, but we're on the other side of the launch. So that journey is still ahead.
That's amazing. And just real quick before we continue, what I loved watching is that you are so open about your story, about your journey. You're very active on LinkedIn. Everyone who's watching should follow. Zoya, talk about that. Why is that so important for you to kind of share lifetime ups, downs, lefts, rights? Like, I think it just that storytelling and kind of, it's like, I'm not necessarily a serial entrepreneur, but it's kind of refreshing to see somebody say it. And it's kind of like, oh, it's okay. This is hard. And, there are ups and downs.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I kind of stumbled into it. I knew that I had to become active on LinkedIn, and I'm sure that, Soraya, Heidi, you probably have been operating that space longer than I, but being in corporate as long as I have, that wasn't a requirement. That wasn't part of personal brand. In fact, that wasn't necessarily a thing. So knowing that I had to step out on my own was definitely a part of it, because I've seen others do it. And here they are talking about their ventures and their experiences and their pursuits. And I'm like, well, gosh, this is, a new side that I have to explore. And so as I started to keeping up with the cadence, it turned out it's called building in public. So that's now a thing. So here we are building in public. We're kind of sharing our experiences and stepping through, all of the daily kind of tribulations. Certainly not daily. I don't overpost or overshare that much, or try not to. But week over week, there's progress to have been made. And if you kind of look back in the last, definitely 10 months worth of that regular posting, I guess there's been a journey to share and look back to. And if along the way it's helped anyone whatsoever both step out of that corporate role or exercise their own voice, or even kind of troubleshoot through some of those precarious stages in startup life, happy to do it every day.
So I feel like if we had this conversation in early 2020, the capital markets were wildly different, right? Like companies were valued at, ridiculous multiples, not necessarily having revenue. So one of the ideas around this topic today was around kind of bootstrapping and the kind of need to kind of preserve and control your destiny a bit more, where it seemed like the knee-jerk reaction 4 years ago was to just raise and who knows what will happen. But with interest rates going up and the economy kind of, shifting, has that created, maybe Soraya, we'll start with you, like, was that really just like an overwhelming challenge? Was it an opportunity? Was it something that didn't impact you because you had always thought you were just going to grow organically and kind of find like the right exit? Like how do founders think about this and this moment maybe?
Yeah, I think raising funds, regardless of when it is and in what market, is difficult. It's not easy, especially as first-time founders. I think it gets a little bit easier maybe if you're an exited founder, but especially as kind of a minority, kind of a woman, like I think there is still that, even in 2020, that was difficult. I think Naeem and I were really lucky that we did bootstrap, we did invest our own. We really believed in our idea, and we really did invest in our own idea, especially early on. And someone that gave us really great advice was that kind of don't take on investment until you really need it. And so we very, very early on, we were still idea stage. We wanted to raise some funds, and then we got that advice, which I'm really glad we did take. And then we did end up raising a little over $1 million during COVID. And yeah, it was hard, and I can expect that it's even harder now to do, because I feel like right now what we're seeing is that kind of VCs are more selective in the industries that they invest in the founders that they invest in. And I think that their strategy, and maybe I think Heidi, you'd be the right person to I'm not in that space, but I think what I'm seeing is that the focus is on profitability. Kind of how soon can they kind of profit from a venture? How soon can they see kind of a return on their investment, which maybe wasn't the case earlier on, or kind of in 2020. There was just a little bit more kind of room for let's see what happens, and then maybe we'll get our investment back.
Interesting. Yeah, Heidi, maybe a good segue to you. How do you guys think about this today than maybe your founders did a couple of years ago?
It's interesting when you're in it, you're sort of responding in real time, and now being able to look back and seeing sort of the market shift a little bit. I mean, I think everyday Americans are seeing it just in mortgages, right? Like everybody's holding out for the interest rates to come down, and what's that going to look like, and what's the timetable for that? I mean, it plays out at sort of every market level. Certainly 2023 was a down year for us. We made fewer investments than we had made before. I will say, from an investor perspective, obviously, having companies take a little bit kind of de-bloat around the valuation, be able to kind of vet companies from more of a month over month, especially in early stage. We don't do any, we do very limited pre-revenue investments. And as an early stage investor, like, I shy away from pre-revenue. It's just too early to tell. So we're looking for product market fit. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for, at least 10% sort of revenue growth month after month. And that just wasn't the case in sort of 2017 through 2023. I think PitchBook put something out that between 2017 and 2022, the dry powder had nearly tripled to $310 billion. But grew just 2% in the first 9 months of 2023. We are seeing like additional investors being hired again at venture firms this year, not quickly and not a ton, but it's definitely a sign that sort of years of this unchecked growth that got slowed down in 2023 is maybe like stabling and on the rise again. And yeah, I think for women, like, Soraya mentioned, for those who aren't familiar, of all the venture capital out there, women account for only 2% of it, and that's for predominantly white women. The stats are, even worse than that for women of color. And then if you think about sort of this idea like sociology 101, right? Like cells, we tend to convene, build relationships, invest in people who look, live, love like we do. Only 7% of all of assets under management, and that's not just early stage, that's real estate, that's liquid, you name it. Only 7% of those assets are allocated by women. So in addition to sort of like wanting to increase the amount of capital being invested in women founders, I'm also really interested in seeing this new crop of like female diverse general partners pop up and all of these emerging fund managers, because I think that's going to be a really important part of shifting the market as well.
Nice. So Zoya, as you think about like the rest of this year going into 2025, how do you think about scale and growth? I mean, are you trying to have conversations with VCs, or are you just focused on bootstrapping? I mean, are you heads down but head up? I mean, how do you do this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're decision making in near time, with runway ahead that we look to, but how we got here is not how we're necessarily going to scale and grow. Especially, we've got a B2C to B2B kind of play, and for that, you do need, in fact, runway. And we've got a team that's a bit dynamic in that we're moonlighting. I'm full time. The rest of the team is still moonlighting. We're a team of 6, and so that there's definitely power behind the wall, if you will, but there's still very much a wall. And the greatest compliment as a founder, and I'm sure Soraya, you can probably speak to this, is when the team would like to come over full time. And in fact, they have expressed that desire very soundly along the way. And there's nothing more than I would love for that to kind of feel, part of our day to day. And for that, we are pre-revenue, Heidi. So, it's an imbalanced scale at this point. So we've held out this long. It's been a year. We were very passionate about bringing a product to market. Through our bootstrapping means, it's not only from a financial perspective would that be, an important lever, but just in all of the ways that felt important to us. It was part of our brand. It was part of our ability. We specifically compiled a team worth of doers that were willing to, roll up their sleeves and put their experience of 15, 20 years plus each into something that we really believe in and that we think would have a real impact. So that's been the journey to date. And now on the other side of it, we are in fact, looking for product market fit. We're navigating through those waters. And if there's a capital opportunity for us to pursue with strategic partners who share in that vision for us, that would be a very important part of our journey to come. So never say never, but it just has not been part of the journey thus far.
Interesting. And Soraya, take us back a little bit, right? Like you guys were up and running, you had raised some money, you had hired a team. How did you think about the decision matrix? Was it a timing thing? Were you eager and ready to make a pivot? Like, was it obvious that PunchBowl News was the right one? Like, take us back in time to just like that thought process about like, continuing to bootstrap and just evolve versus, finding a strategic kind of, partner.
So I think that one thing that was evident is that we do have a few competitors in this space who were looking at kind of things that they were doing. They were acquiring other companies.
Yeah.
They were expanding the products that they were offering to their customers. And then we, obviously being kind of the size that we were, couldn't acquire other companies or continue to offer things to our subscribers. And so one thing that we started thinking of early on, and you touched on this, Zoya, is strategic partnerships. So we started entering into strategic partnerships with a few other entities. Kind of there were those that were helping us on kind of adding new features, basically, kind of other startups that were maybe VC backed or not. And one was kind of in relation to us providing expert services. One was kind of offering kind of a more kind of consulting arm to kind of, just augment what we were doing. And all of it was revenue share. So it wasn't something that was a huge burden on us. And kind of we were looking at it through that lens, like what can we continue to offer and continue to be relevant through strategic partnerships. And so I think that's the lens that we looked at the kind of eventual acquisition with PunchBowl News. Kind of, is there a possibility for a strategic partnership? Is this something that really we think makes sense for them as much as it makes sense for us? And that's where the conversation started. But I just wanted to answer something to what you said, Zoya, about, I think you mentioned as well, Heidi, about being pre-revenue. I think that that is the most difficult time as a founder, is that when you're still waiting, even if you do have revenue, for that revenue to hit a certain bar to then kind of have invest, because we had numbers of VCs that were reached out all the time, and they were waiting for our revenue to reach kind of a specific number, and then all of them were interested in investing, and then until it hits that number, all of them were like, yeah, we're really interested, but maybe not yet. And I think that at the time, I looked at some statistics that even funding that is allocated to startups that are pre-revenue, all of it goes to it goes to women founders. I mean, a very small amount does, and so it really is hard. And I think that kind of finding those strategic partnerships, finding allies that kind of can help you within this stage was something that was really helpful to us, but definitely is a struggle for sure.
Can I just underscore something there? I think, I talk a lot about this, right? Especially given sort of my theory of change and our thesis. It's no wonder that the bulk of sort of entrepreneurial and, let's just say, tech, bros and kind of exited billionaires or whatever, 100 millionaires end up being straight white men, because the constituency that can typically, or sort of in general, go without a paycheck for 1, 2, 3, 5 years is a specific demographic. So I agree wholeheartedly. There needs to be more emphasis put on pre-revenue women founders in particular. What's especially tough for women allocators, and especially like female emerging fund managers, is we all know, like, as a woman, you've got one shot, right? It happens at work all the time. Oh, we hired a woman one time, that didn't work out, so we're not going to do that again in that leadership position. It's the same thing for managing funds. You better return on that portfolio or you're not going to make it to fund 2. And there have been so many new funds that have cropped up over the past couple of years. Only 50% of them make it to fund 2. So it's this sort of push-pull, and I'm really interested in figuring out what's the kind of non-dilutive capital, like how can public and private, or sort of foundations and philanthropy and venture play together in a more integrated way so that we can solve for that beginning point too, because I hear you loud and clear and agree wholeheartedly that that's a breakdown in sort of system change.
Heidi, that's so interesting to hear that there's that struggle on both sides of the house. You're feeling it from internally, right? Because there's grass is grass ultimately. So your experience is personal to what it is that you're seeing on the inside from a VC standpoint. And there is still, I'm sure, a lot of that disparity, as you've described, much more so even than we would assume, because you're like, oh, wow, she's made it, or anybody in corporate or any of those kind of high position roles. There's just so much competition for them. And speaking of non-dilutive funds and competition, there's so much competition, right, for the few grants that are out there, because there's such a need, and because there's this femtech, female kind of entrepreneurial leg that's so thirsty for those funds, and those opportunities are created, but tremendous competition for them.
So there's obviously huge demand for that, but it feels like there's a reduced supply of that kind of non-dilutive capital, right, Heidi? I mean, like, I feel like back in the day, it was like the 1776s of the world. They popped up. There were these opportunities. They seem fewer and further between. I mean, Soraya, I think you had some success. I don't remember which groups, maybe private sector companies were kind of early stage supporters where maybe the stakes weren't so high. Have you had interactions with other, groups or entities that have kind of been supportive or seen good models? And this is open to anybody that kind of should be scaled, right? Like, I think so much of this is like somebody sees something in Cleveland or in the heartland, and it's like, how do you get it to the coast? And there's so much obviously on the coast. How do you get it to the rest of the country and so on?
Oh, which is like its own whole issue, right? Over 85% of capital is going towards New York, California, Texas, and Massachusetts. And as a Virginian, I'm really interested in sort of these growing startup ecosystems. In Richmond, you're seeing it. Kansas City has Kansas City Rise. They've done amazing stuff for the community, for the city. But I have seen a couple of grants. They particularly come from sort of female philanthropists and or family foundations who care about economic development and understand sort of the underpinnings and how it's all connected. But they're small grants, right? They're $25,000, $50,000. Like when you're trying to bootstrap and you need another 12 months of runway, that's not going to get you that far. I think some of the accelerator programs, right, the big ones are obviously taking equity, and then you've got to decide for yourself, like, is that a trade that I want to make based on the opportunity and the access to additional funding? The smaller ones are giving, again, small, non-dilutive grants. I will say this, and I do think this is like a pro, and of course, with everything, there's a pro, there's also a little bit of a con. The FSBCI dollars that come down from from the federal government to state governments, every state deploys them differently. So for Virginia, we are receiving, I want to say $173 million. Don't quote me on this. I think 73 is towards debt and maybe 100 towards equity. And then Virginia has like a direct investment model and a fund of funds model. Virginia Venture Partners is tucked inside of Virginia Innovation Partnership Corporation, VIPC. So like every state has their own, kind of complicated setup.
So complicated and least bit like the worst PR ever.
The worst PR
ever. I'm like, what? How is this so hard?
And
like I'm for you and I can't find it.
Well, and you have to be Zoya or Soraya, like a lawyer and a C-suite executive to even find it and understand it and read it. I will say there's like a lot of that goes to pre-revenue companies. The pitfall then is the reporting requirements are as though you're running a nonprofit and you have to report on which contractor, like that's cumbersome, but I do think there's some interesting opportunity there.
Oh my gosh. If I can just also, I'm very triggered with the state specific nuances that occur. We thought we were smart, and I don't regret this decision. I know that it's going to be strategic in the long run, but in this very early pre-revenue stage as mentioned. So we incorporated in Delaware, and we operated, pre-product. We were there for a while, and then we learned about all these great state benefits coming out of New Jersey. There's a 20 to 25% state credit, an angel credit that is awarded to women and minority owned majority businesses. So then we go ahead and certify for that and go through all the rigmarole of trying to, like all the applications. And then we get hit with the New Jersey tax bill at the end of the season. We haven't even been in market yet as a product, and we get hit with that. So, I mean, there's just, with all of the good, so well said, there's also the con, and we're just like it's too early for this bill. And I have a picture of painstakingly sliding it into the mailbox, crying as we cut that check. We only cut 2 checks ever, fun fact. Both were to female solopreneurs. And those are for real operational, legal kind of, output driven initiatives. And then there was that check to the state. And we're like, well, yeah. So.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, it's right. I think it validates what Electo originally was trying to do, helping people navigate and deal with government. I mean, it's such a, we always talk about kind of the thesis of the Coffee with Ken model was always tri-sector competence, where the private sector and public sector nonprofits kind of come together in that kind of ecosystem. And it sounds like this, Heidi, is exactly that kind of big problem but for government providing funds, advocacy groups, and kind of accelerators stepping in and private companies coming in, you're not really going to get that force multiplier of creating greater access and opportunity, right? I mean, yeah.
Except for what both of these incredible founders have stated, the strategic partnerships. And I was sitting with a pretty prominent early stage investor, former hedge fund individual yesterday, who said, he was like, more and more, I truly believe that the strategic partnerships are the way to not only bootstrap, but catalyze towards profitability. And he's like, for founders who are too headstrong to do it, as an investor, I just want to say to them, just get there, rev share. It's a matter of, are you going to get there in 3 years or 10 years? And as an investor, you want them to do it in 3 years. So I think what you both are pointing to and underscoring and how you're building your businesses and built your business is just so smart, so efficient, and of course, leave it to a woman to build something that's efficient, profitable, and impactful.
And
Love it.
also relationship based, given the
Yes.
point of partnerships.
So as we kind of wind down, this seems like such a precarious time to actually even be starting companies, running companies, right? Like this is not the heyday of 5 years ago. Are you optimistic about, growing and scaling in today's market? And do you have advice for other founders? Maybe we'll start with you, Soraya, Zoya, and then end with Heidi.
Sure. So I'll give one advice that it was something I had read somewhere. I'm trying to remember where it was. It was probably from some fund manager somewhere. But I remember I actually have a list of every time I found advice anywhere online that I thought was relevant to our venture. I had this Google Doc shared with Naeem, and I'd like put it, and every time we fell down, we'd go and read the advice people would give. But one of them was to make to like every month take stock of what are the blockers for growth, kind of what are actually what is blocking me from growing this company, and to make that list and to just be very vulnerable and to read that list and try to kind of attack it head on, because I feel like sometimes you're in this bubble when you're building or innovating where you don't want to tackle the kind of the whatever it is that is blocking growth, or you try to focus on something else to maybe downplay the thing that's blocking you. And so I think that was really helpful for us.
That's nice. Perfect. Zoya?
Love that. Just two quick part answer. Firstly, show up. I've got no advice to dole out other than whatever your plight, your journey, your challenges, just show up and kind of take that initial step. A conversation begets the next. You never know where it leads, and the micro steps really start to amount to meaningful milestones. Secondly, Soraya, kind of jumping off into your point too, as a founder, someone else gave me that advice very early on. I like to repeat it and kind of pass it on here. And that is, as a founder, your problem or job number one is to invent your own problems, which is so counterintuitive for many of us who are, type A alphas that go out and like love to problem solve. But most of the time we're the one to ingest the problem that are being given to us, and then we go out and attack that thing or to solve it. In this case, you have to be both the one to create it as well as the one solving it, right? To your point about blockers, et cetera. So it's an interesting dichotomy, but it requires a balance between the two.
Maybe.
I think it's a great time. I think, innovation is only on the rise, and women are on the rise. I mean, we're at the precipice of the great transfer of wealth. In 10 years, women are positioned to control the majority of the GDP in this country for the first time. That means that we're going to see a big shift in both in who's writing the check, who's receiving the check, and the way we're solving and innovating for solutions. So I'm really optimistic. And then I would just say this goes to women founders in particular. We're so conditioned, especially in the world of investment or venture or finance, to like be perfect. And I would say that in my 4 years in finance, my biggest aha has been how mediocre so many of my male, not my male counterparts, but just like men in general are with their work. And so I would just say, like, ask questions. You don't need to be scared of looking like you don't know, or you're dumb, or think that, oh, now people aren't going to want to invest in me or help me or partner with me because I don't know the answer. Just ask the question. And yeah, I echo what Soraya and Zoya said as well.
Yeah, and I think so. Heidi, one of our mutual friend Wes Moore, always says, like, if you're in the room, you're supposed to be in the room. So get over it and just be in the room, right? And it's kind of like just have the confidence and try. It's so fun seeing all three of you. And what's been so exciting about this series is like you have like three amazing friends who don't really get to know each other, and then we get to invite you guys on, and hopefully you all stay in touch and can help each other grow and continue to help others who are tuning in. So it's so great to see you guys. Zoya, Soraya, Heidi, thank you for doing this. You guys are the best.
Thank you, Ken, for bringing us together.
Of course. And thanks everybody for tuning in. You can always go to coffeewithken.com to catch up on past episodes and see what we have in store. So until next time, thank you everybody, and we'll talk soon. Good luck.